how do you see the European landscape panning over in the next 5 to 10 years? Euro, breakup, slow grinding economic growth.
Again, I'm not really, my opinions I don't think are of much interest on that. I read the papers like everybody else and I just don't know. I mean, I think the whole Europe thing's a very bad idea and I think it's all getting a bit political because it's not being driven now by economic considerations. People are going to start worrying about people. You know, obviously you've got the Greek situation. I think everyone's kicking everything down the road. You know, I think you've got to, my basic view on Europe is the same as most people's. I mean, unless you have, which I'm not saying is a good or a bad thing, total political integration, i.e. it becomes one country with one set of laws, one parliament, one taxes, then I can't see that a single currency can survive. But in the long term, but maybe that they're trying to cobble it together, and I think people should decide. Either Europe becomes one country, I'm happy with that. Don't know whether we'd particularly want to join it or not, but fair enough. You have one parliament, one set of rules, one level of tax, and you know, good or bad, you know, that is the only logical way that you can have one currency for everybody.
Do you think it'll collapse then?
Yes. I do, because I don't think the Germans are going to want to be ruled by have the Greeks telling them what to do, and vice versa. And I think the Greeks have been grotesquely unfair on the Germans to, you know, compare them to Nazis and sort of all that kind of rubbish. Where, you know, the Germans have bent over backwards to keep the whole thing on the road at huge expense to your average German worker. So yes, I think it will collapse because I don't think there's enough will for any more pain. There has been enough goodwill because Germany sort of blinked, and Greece to a certain degree, you know, gave stuff back, but it hasn't solved anything. It just boots it down the road. None of the problems have been magically solved. None of the European banks' balance sheets are back really up to speed. I mean, unlike the Americans, the thing's just a complete mess. And you know, how long can goodwill just cobble it together? I don't think it will. I don't think Greece will be in the common market in 2 years' time.
You know, your overview on QE.
I'm baffled by it. That's all. I don't get it. I mean, I remember, you know, when I was at school, if you put your hand up in a class in economics and said, "Oh, well, what's all this problem about recession and asset prices, deflation? Why don't we just print money?" And you'd have been told by your economics teacher, "No, you don't do that. That's what they do in Zimbabwe. You know, Western countries don't do that. Money doesn't grow on trees. You can't just print the stuff." And that's precisely what every major government is doing. Japan, Germany, now the European Central Bank. Where it will end is just frightening. It's just, I don't know. I mean, okay, it's ended in the United States, but the debt that all these countries have, it's impossible to pay it back without inflation. How can you pay back this sort of money? And when, you know, we're just booting it all down to our children's generation. I don't know. I'm totally baffled by QE. I get the principle of it, just about, but I can't see how it works. All it does is it enriches a very small percentage of people, and I think the people have sort of cottoned onto that and are pretty pissed off by it.
Just comment on this then. The sort of the result of this intervention is we have a rip-off situation for the consumer for 5 years. Base rates at 0.5, mortgages at 4%. You know, it's a joke.
I agree that artificially low interest rates rips off savers. It encourages you to spend. It encourages people not to save. It's this whole thing of creating demand. You know, you've got to be, you know, you've got to do your duty and go out and shop for stuff that you don't want. You know, keep the economy on the road by demand, more, more, more. I mean, I agree. I just think it's crazy. I think short-term interest rates is, you know, we are in, and these interest rates were brought in as an emergency in 2007-8. That's what, 6 years ago. We've had interest rates totally abnormal for the last 300, 400 years. And it's now the new normality. People now who are 25 years old for their whole sort of adult life don't realise that interest rates can be anything other than zero. I remember when I had a mortgage, the rate went from 10 to 15%. You know, Can you say that's not going to happen again? Even a reversion to mean of interest rates at 4 or 5% base rates, which means mortgages are 9-10%. But, you know, you try and persuade a kid that there's any danger of that happening, and they just say, oh, that was ancient history. You know, we've been sort of conditioned now into thinking that money is free or cheap, and will be forever, and the government, they can't have it any other way. You know, the government have got to keep somehow the show on the road, because otherwise the wheels come off. I mean, imagine the government trying to service its own debt at 4 or 5%, you know. Just couldn't do it. But so I feel something will give, but I've been wrong. I mean, I thought something would give in 2008 far more seriously than in fact it did give. And I've been waiting and waiting, and markets are hitting new highs. And that's why I'm not really interested in predicting the way markets are going. But I cannot see how printing money can not end in tears. And we certainly haven't ended in tears yet.